This happened maybe 10 years ago when I was in my early 30s. I was standing in line at the local pharmacy to get my prescriptions. This is a small town and I am a regular there, so they know me on site. I was behind a couple of other people in line and there were a couple of people behind me. I kept feeling a tickle on my hair in the back of my head, but every time I looked behind me, the guy there was a few steps behind and looking at the door. This happened several times by the time I was at the front of the line. The pharmacist told me she wanted to talk to me about my medication in a consultation room they had at the time, since converted to a bathroom. I thought this was weird because we both knew I had been on this medication for years and would be for life. Nothing new. I get back to the room and close the door, and she comes in from the door at the other side that leads from the pharmacy. She told me that the man behind me had been stepping forward, sticking his nose in my hair and smelling, before stepping back and looking at the door. This shook me pretty bad, as this is such weird behavior, especially in my little town. The pharmacy staff insisted on having me wait there until the guy was distracted by another pharmacy employee. And they had a security guard walk me to my car and watch me drive off to make sure I was gone before Hair Sniffer came out and saw what I was driving and what direction I was going. I still use this pharmacy and some of the same people still work here. I will always be grateful that they had took the initiative to make sure I was safe that day. This just happened earlier today, and I can't think of a better place to vent about it. I work for the USPS as a city carrier. For those that don't know, that means I walk a lot and through all types of neighborhoods. That being said, I work in a relatively small town, and while there are some parts of it that are more run down, I've never had any bad encounters until today. The last bit of my route is 3 streets that run parallel to each other, so you walk up and down one street, drive the car to the next, and walk up and down it. I'd say it's a low to middle income area, but nothing that makes you feel uneasy. Just a bunch of cheap college apartments and a few rundown houses. I'm beginning the first of the 3 streets and I see a man, maybe 20 years old, riding his bike on the opposite side of the street but going the same direction I am. I thought nothing of it and went about my business. He ended up turning a corner at the end of the block and I forgot about him. I'm continuing down the same street when I notice this guy is riding next to me again. I think it's a little bizarre, but figure he's just taking laps around the block or something. Mind you, it's a solid 10 degrees outside today with snow on the ground. So looking back, it's a bit strange that somebody was out for a casual bike ride, but people have done weirder things. I'm finishing up the last houses on that street and heading back to my van when I notice this dude is now going the same way I am. Again. Even though I had turned around and started going the opposite direction now. I thought everything a coincidence until I drove to the next street over. My first stop there was an apartment box. For those who might not know, it's one huge mailbox with several mailboxes inside of it. And all that means is that I have to spend a decent amount of time there because there's maybe 16 people's mail I'm sorting. While I'm doing that, the guy shows up again and just sits on his bike, blankly staring at me from a few yards away while I work. I again gave this all the benefit of the doubt and think maybe he's just waiting for me to finish the box so he could check his mail. As I lock it up and move on to the next house, I see him following behind me. When I stop at a house to deliver, he stops in the same street and stares. It's at this point I decide there is something going on, that I need to distance myself from and go back to the van, despite having almost the entire street left to deliver. I go back to the post office and tell my boss about what happened, and he agreed to have me deliver mail for another route on the opposite side of town. I gladly do this, and it takes me maybe an hour and a half. I figured they'd trade off the mail and somebody else would go finish the small portion I had left with the creepy dude. Not so much. Once I get back to the office, I get asked to go finish the route from the morning. I was hesitant, but the point was made that it was hours later. It had started raining. Because why would he be there 2 hours later and on a bike in the rain? And they'd send somebody to patrol the street. Fine. I head back out with a coworker following in another car behind me. I finish the street I had left earlier without any problems, so he heads back to the office. I moved to my last street feeling relatively at ease and started to wonder if I was overreacting this morning. I get to the end of my first half of the street, conveniently the farthest away from my vehicle that I can get during this entire ordeal, and there he is. He pops out from behind the house on his bike, riding furiously in my direction. Panic sets in. I try to stay calm and act as if I wasn't bothered by his presence at all, but he's riding right on my heel, speeding up to get in front of me, and then just blankly staring through me again, until I pass him and the following continues. I casually put my mail into my bag so my hands are free. That way I could get to my mace as I call my boss. I didn't want this guy to know I was panicked and calling for help, so I pretend my boss is another city carrier just a few streets away. Hey Dave, I know you're working just a couple blocks from here and I have a couple really heavy packages. I need your help and help me deliver them. I'm on this street right now. My boss was so confused. He started telling me how he wasn't a few streets over, and that I was calling the wrong person while I'm practically yelling over him. Oh yeah, I can get the numbers off the packages. Hold on, let me get to the car. Just don't hang up yet. I can get them right now. Because I really didn't want him to hang up. This guy hasn't said a word to me but is still right on my heels, literally. Had I stopped walking, he would have ran my ankle over. I make it back to the car and tell my boss what is exactly happening while this dude does circles around me. As I drive away down the street, I see him racing on his bike behind me chasing my car. I make a few turns down blocks trying to see if I can lose him. And he's behind me the entire time until I reach the busy main road where he stops. The cops were called, and I was instructed to once again return to the street to finish the mail with cops patrolling the area to hopefully bait this dude into getting caught. No surprise, but he doesn't show up. No idea how the situation is going to get handled yet, but hopefully something gets done. Creepy bicycle dude, let's never meet again. Years ago, when I was a kid, I worked at one of those now extinct video rental stores. Working at a video rental store wasn't the best gig, but it was better than sweeping up loose popcorn and unsticking gum from the bottom of seats at the local movie theater. And despite being a tad goofy and shy, I was never the sad sack buster at the place down the block. I worked there for over 3 years before anything really weird happened. I mean, sure, I'd get the odd kid trying to check out movies they shouldn't, or the same dude renting that one movie with that actress one too many times. But there was never anything overly horrifying or weird or bad until that guy showed up. It was the Friday before New Year's and my 10th solo closing shift. My manager had just started trusting me with enough responsibility to work entirely alone. So there I was, by myself, in a semi-abandoned strip mall off the side of a crumbling road in an unheard of little town somewhere in New Mexico. It was surprisingly slow for a Friday night, and I chalked it up to people going out, getting drunk, or being otherwise more sociable than me. I wasn't complaining. Near closing, the door jingled and this guy walked in. And usually, I wouldn't take notice of anyone in particular, but this guy was different. He looked too alert, too aware, too intelligent. It was like he was sizing up the place, sizing me up, sizing the whole fucking world up. I remember exactly what he was wearing, a black suit without a jacket or tie and muddy boots. They looked like cowboy boots. He wandered around the rows of movies, going from comedy to family to horror, glancing around every so often. "Can I help you find anything?" I asked, getting up off my chair and walking towards him. He didn't even look up. He was standing in the horror section. "My sons love this movie." He pointed at The Thing. "And this one." It was Carrie. "Any recommendations? They want a Christmas movie." "A Christmas movie?" He nodded. "So recommendation for a Christmas movie." "Yeah." Ever seen Die Hard? Just came out on VHS." That's a Christmas movie?" I nodded. "The best one?" I walked over to the counter, grabbed the loaded case, then handed it to him. He read the back quickly, coughing once at the description of it. "Oh yeah, they'll love this. Thanks." He turned around his heel and swiftly but assuredly strode out of the building. I followed him, shocked, and said, Sir, you need to rent that. Don't you have an account, sir?" But instead of replying, he just swung himself into his old beat-up black truck, waved, and hauled ass out there. I sighed. "Fuck it," I told myself. "I'll deal with it tomorrow." I closed up shop, and that was that. Except it wasn't. I worked night shifts alone that weekend too, and unlike Friday night, it was busy. So busy I was barely keeping my head above water. I was sitting near the returns bin when the outdoor slot rattled and a familiar title slid inside. Die Hard. Surprised at my good luck and relieved I wouldn't have to file a report, I sighed and flipped the case open. There was a tape inside, but it wasn't Die Hard. There was no label, no identifying features at all. It looked totally blank. I was staring at it, unsure of what to do, when a customer came up with the rentals. Without even thinking, on autopilot, I popped the tape out of the case into the display player and pressed play. There was no sound, just a video, which I couldn't see since the display was above me, facing outwards for the customers to view. Everything was normal for the first few minutes or so, and then someone gasped. "What is that?" It was a lady standing in the family aisle. She was looking up at the display monitor above me. "What the shit?" another customer said near the back by the science fiction and fantasy section. Everyone was looking up, looking at the screen. I scrambled around the counter to see what they were seeing, and it was definitely wasn't anything I was expecting. It was an incredibly grainy dark shot of what looked like a girl of undeterminable age wearing a white sheet. She was sitting on an intricately carved wooden rocking chair and was rocking slowly back and forth, back and forth. Sorry, I mumbled, panicked. "Sorry." I popped the tape out of the player and switched it with 3 men and a baby. "Take that to the police, honey," some lady said. "What? No, I bet you it's just some hooligans trying to scare us all, an elderly man in action said. If that was yours, that's messed up. You should get help. It was a college kid. But I didn't listen to any of them. I took it home. What can I say? I was curious, and I watched it all, twice. There was about 13 minutes of footage spliced between copied clips of Die Hard. It looked like it was filmed inside some sort of warehouse or maybe loony bunker. You know those bunkers people build to survive the end of days or the apocalypse or whatever? The camera was focused on a central point, and the only actor, the girl, wandered around this point in and out of focus, or sat in the center of it looking down. She looked too healthy to be a captive, but too dirty to be free. Some of the scenes showed her rocking in that chair. Some showed her walking around and around and around like a caged animal. There was never anyone else in the shot, never any change in the light, and barely any audio. Truth be told, despite being weird and very, very creepy, nothing about the footage was overly graphic or vulgar. Scary, sure, but the girl seemed physically okay. Mentally, probably not so much. The last image was a single scene that lasted about 10 seconds. Behind the camera, I heard a quiet, small voice. A child. They mumbled something, and the girl looked up, giving a full, clear shot of her face. And I'll never forget it. Never forget her. She wasn't crying. Her face was totally devoid of fear or despair or lunacy. She looked justifiably pissed. I paused the video there, slowed my breath, then rewound, turning the volume up. I could barely make out what the voice was saying. It sounded like save or safe. I popped the tape out of the player knowing what I should do, but not knowing if I could do it. The man came back Sunday night, December 31st, 1989. Again, right before I closed up. He was wearing jeans and a plain white t-shirt this time and had replaced that uncanny alert look with one of the immense annoyance. Without a word, I reached under the desk, trying to be sly. The man paused mid-step, raised an eyebrow, and then continued towards me, confident and cool. He reached a counter and tapped it with his fingers. "Can I help you?" Yesterday I returned a tape. Turns out one of my sons, I think it was the youngest, but his brother insists it was him. Bless their little hearts. Well, one of them put the wrong VHS in the case. One of my personal tapes. I was wondering if you had it. I swallowed. "Oh yeah, you're the guy, yeah, I noticed that. I wanted to call you to return it, but you never made an account, so I kept it here just in case. Glad you came back. Can I set you up with an account now?" The corners of the man's mouth quivered like he was fighting a smile. Like he knew what I was trying to do and was purposefully withholding his information. "Won't need it. They've had their movie rentings rights revoked." He cleared his throat. "You didn't watch it, did you?" "Nope." "Good." He set the copy of Die Hard on the counter and looked at me expectantly. I hesitated, then slid the other tape towards him. "Is that all, sir?" He smiled, and the thing of it is, that smile traveled all the way around his face. It didn't stop at his eyes, didn't leave me wanting. He didn't look evil, yet it still looked like he was calculating the situation, sizing me up. But I trusted him, and I hated it. He smiled at me like we were sharing a secret, just the two of us, and that made us pals. He picked up the VHS, said, "Hope so," then turned on his heel and left. Never saw him again, never told anyone what I did until now. I think about the tape almost every day and wonder if I could have done anything to help. Who that girl was, if she's dead now. And I wonder what happened to his sons. If they saved her. I wonder what their story is. There is one other thing though. One little thing. Deep in the bowels of my basement, I have kept something hidden away, sealed tight in plastic, unspoken of, untouched. See, the tape I gave back to the man, it contained what he wanted, yeah, but it wasn't what he gave me. At least, it wasn't the original.